All right, guys, Garrison Doctor here. Be tying my signature Sweetmeat Caddis. This is a great caddis imitation, but also just an awesome all-around nymph, attractor nymph. Don't be afraid to fish this when you're not necessarily seeing caddis around. I'm going to be tying the tangerine colorway today, which is kind of a nice orange. We're starting with a 450 BL hook, nice wide gap. It's a jig style hook, obviously. Tungsten bead. This is a 3.3 millimeter. You can size the bead per the depth of the water that you want to fish. So you could put on a size 14, which this is a 2.8, or go all the way up to 3.8 or even more if you want to get really aggressive and you need to get down through fast water. So I'm going to start, just lock in my thread, build up enough, not to really seat the bead necessarily, but just so it's not going too crazy for me on the front of the hook. If you want to, you can use just a little piece of fake lead wire in here to lock it in, save you some thread, but just enough there to kind of seat that bead so it's not sliding back on me. And the next thing we're going to do is cut a length of wire. This is UTC wire, size BR in ginger. This gives the tangerine colorway. I want to just keep the wire nice and clean on the top of the hook shank. I'm going to try to keep my wraps kind of clean, but you don't need to worry about it too much. So we're going to wrap this wire forward to create the abdomen or the body of the fly. I'm going to just create a little bit of a taper here with my thread wraps to give it a little bit of a taper forward. Keep those as clean as you can, but you don't need to be too crazy about it. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. Just to give us a little bit of shape. And this is a nice opportunity if you have a rotary vise to use that rotary function and kind of let you see these wraps as you move forward. And there can be some little gaps in between the wire. Don't worry about that. I almost think it kind of gives the fly a little bit more texture. There's no tail on this, it being a caddis imitation, right? So I didn't forget the tail. We're not doing a tail. We don't need one. We don't care. Like I said, this is the Sweetmeat Caddis. I named it that just because it's such a tasty little morsel. The trout they see it and they just want to eat it. So that's where the name comes from. Big backstory there. Okay, so we're gonna tie in some other materials behind the bead. So I don't need to wrap all the way. Just want to make sure this wire is tied in, and then you can go ahead and, if you can, just helicopter that off. Okay. And that is the body. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is just get a little bit of dubbing out here. This is Ice Dub Peacock. I love the kind of big texture on this dubbing. It's got a little flash to it. You know, this is really more of a pupa, caddis pupa, but like I said, and just get yourself, it can be an attractor pattern as well. So get a little dubbing noodle going here. Doesn't need to be super tight. We want some of those fibers coming out. Make sure that's tied in. And then I'm just gonna kind of take a look, maybe try to just brush a few of these dubbing fibers out, get at that quote unquote bugginess. Okay. And if any of them seem like obnoxiously long, you can trim them or pull them out. Okay, so that's looking good. The next step is the Cdc Wing, and this gives the fly just a lot of movement in the water with these Cdc fibers. I think it really helps make the fly look a little bit more natural. So get a nice sized Cdc feather if you can, and just cut that central stem out. Pull the Cdc fibers forward. And we're just gonna do a tuft of Cdc on the hook point side of this fly. You know, it's gonna ride hook point up, hopefully, right? That's the jig style that we love. And I just want these Cdc fibers to rest kind of 180 degrees on top. In terms of length, I like them, you know, right about hook length there, all the way to the back of the bend of the hook. Okay, so just lock those in on top. And trim that off nice and tight if you can. Okay. And I'm just gonna clean up a couple of these fibers that are kind of coming forward. You know, just because I'm a fly tyer and I'm OCD like that, the fish won't care. Okay, so the next step is a little bit of a duck flank feather. Some mallard flank would be great. I think this is actually widgeon from a widgeon I harvested, but any type of nice long fiber with this barring on it. And what we want to do is just basically 2 individual feather fibers on each side, tied in a little bit longer than the CDC. Okay, so I want these back behind the hook a little bit, and this is going to give the fly a little more interest, a little more texture. It's going to allude to maybe some antennas from caddis pupa, some legs. Okay, so I'm going to wait to trim that one off till I get the other 2 in on the opposite side here. And if you don't have any duck flank feathers around, don't stress it too much. You can leave them off and still catch a nice chunk of fish. But I really like like I said, the texture that these add to the fly. Okay, so those are kind of matched in length coming off the back. Just gonna make sure they're locked in the front here. And then I'm gonna trim the butt sections off. Okay, so you're looking at how that's gonna ride in the water. And then the final step, this is a quick tie, as you can see. It's a nice one that you can tie a bunch of them with different sized beads. I highly recommend you kind of production tie these and do all the wire bodies first and then come back. Makes it a lot easier. But the final step here is just a little dubbing collar. I like a little dubbing collar in black. This is just a hairline dubbing in black. Gives a little more contrast across the fly. So that bright copper bead and then that black collar and then the feather, I think adds just a nice contrast. But this can be a pretty tight noodle of dubbing. We don't want to add a ton of bulk. Just a little bit to kind of clean up the front of the fly. That's maybe even a little more than I want. Okay, I think that'll work. Okay. So that's it. The Sweetmeat Caddis. We're just gonna throw a quick whip finish on this guy. And I would, if you want, just for increased durability, hit a little drop of glue or cement on the back side of this hook, just to make sure everything's really locked in. Okay. Make sure that's nice and tight. Trim off the thread. Okay. And that is Sweetmeat Caddis, Tangerine. My other colorway of this fly, which I highly recommend tying some as well, is in a lime green with a UV brown dub. Comes off almost like with a little bit of a purple sheen to it. I highly recommend you check that one out as well. Okay, that's it for me. Tie them up.